It happened on a winter night in the year 873 in a remote fishing village along the Norwegian coast. Inside a moss-roofed wooden house, 15 people lay pressed together on damp straw, their breath mingling with the smoke of burning oak. No alarm clocks, no LED lights, no midnight emails. They were doing something that modern civilization has forgotten how to do: sleep, and not just a nap. Real sleep. If you believe you need an app for insomnia, a $1 million mattress, or a brainwave playlist just to drift off, the Vikings would laugh and then go back to sleep. Before we step into those endless Nordic nights where sleep was as deep as the bottom of a fjord and cold enough that people had to cling to one another to survive. Hit subscribe if you enjoy uncovering forgotten pieces of history, the kinds of stories that make you realize our ancestors lived more truly than we do. And leave me a comment telling me where you are watching from. Because it is strange, isn't it, that an ancient way of sleeping can connect us today across continents and centuries through nothing more than curiosity. Because the Viking sleep was never just about lying down. It was a story of darkness, of breath, of love, of survival, and of death as soft as velvet beneath the snowy forest. A story that might make you turn off the lights earlier tonight, or at the very least question that high-tech mattress you are lying on. You might be watching this video at 2 o'clock in the morning, tossing and turning on a memory foam mattress worth more than $2,000 with the hum of white noise in your ears and a slow-dissolving melatonin pill in your stomach. You believe you are doing everything right to sleep well, but you are still awake. Meanwhile, more than 1,000 years ago in the freezing lands of Northern Europe, a man named Thorvald was sound asleep on a pile of straw inside a wooden house with no windows, wrapped in darkness as black as ink, while the wind howled through the pine forest. He was not sleeping because he wanted to, but because his body was programmed correctly. He did not need an app. He did not need medicine, and he slept better than you have ever known. The Vikings. Those who were once scorned by the civilized world as barbaric, violent, and savage. Yet they had something the modern world is desperately craving: a full night's rest. Deep, steady, and free of stress. While today's neuroscientists are struggling to understand why 70 million Americans cannot sleep, men and women in the 9th century, living in darkness, resting on straw, breathing wood smoke, had already achieved what we now call optimal sleep architecture. They did not call it sleep hygiene. They simply called it life. And here is the most remarkable part: they did not sleep like us. They had no concept of 8 continuous hours. Their sleep was divided in 2, a pattern that modern science calls segmented sleep or biphasic sleep, now increasingly believed to be more in tune with human biology. They slept twice during the night. The first stretch from sunset until around midnight, then woke up for a while. Not because of insomnia, but simply because that was natural. Afterward, they went back to sleep until dawn. No stress, no worry. Not because they had nothing to do the next morning, but because they lived by the rhythm of the earth, not the rhythm of an alarm clock. You may think waking up at night is a disorder, but for the Vikings, it was a sacred hour. An hour for lovemaking, an hour for whispering secrets, an hour to check on the livestock, rekindle the fire, or simply sit and watch the embers glow like stars on a winter night. Why? Because during that time, the hormone prolactin in the human bloodstream reaches its peak. A hormone associated with deep relaxation, a state nearly identical to meditation. On cold nights in Northern Europe, surrounded by the crackle of firewood and the smell of burning wool, the Vikings touched a kind of rest that modern wellness centers in Los Angeles are now charging $900 a session to replicate. Thorvald had never heard of prolactin, but he knew the feeling of waking in the middle of the night, reaching out his hand to hold his wife. Astrid, who was still asleep, her breath steady beside the axe hanging above their bed. They did not call it intimacy. They simply called it being close. No lamps, no soft music, no sleep playlist. Only the fire snapping in the hearth and a half smile when Astrid opened her eyes and said, "Up to stoke the fire again." Their sleep was never broken by anxiety. None of them had a Zoom meeting scheduled at 8 in the morning. And then after an hour of stillness, as calm as a frozen lake, they returned to their second sleep, deep and long until the sun quietly slipped through the cracks of the wooden shutters. In excavations at York, one of the largest Viking cities in England, archaeologists discovered traces of hearth fires that had burned continuously until dawn. That was not a sign of insomnia, but of life between the two sleeps. In Gretti's saga, an old manuscript, the hero is described as waking after his first sleep, wandering about, and then returning to bed. Literature, archaeology, physiology, all the evidence tells the same story. The Vikings did not sleep like us, but they slept the right way. And what about us? We sleep with the glow of a blue LED shining inches from our faces, even though scientists have proven that just 10 minutes of that light can cut melatonin levels in half. We sleep with our minds wound tight as a guitar string, still replaying an email left unanswered. We try to force ourselves into 8 unbroken hours, even though millions of years of evolution suggest humans were never designed to sleep like that. And when we wake in the night, instead of listening to our bodies, we panic. I cannot sleep. Something is wrong, and so we really do lose sleep. The Viking sleep is a reminder that the human body was once programmed to rest well without interference, that if we lived by the light of the sun instead of the light of our screens, we might find that primal peace again. No medicine, no machines. Just turning off the lights, listening to our breath, and remembering that our ancestors once slept this way, every night for hundreds of generations. You might think they were warriors. They needed strength. But perhaps it was because they knew how to rest, that they had the power to fight. And perhaps what gave them good sleep was not that they had less anxiety, but that they lived lives with nothing to prove when they woke. And you are trying to sleep in order to have the energy to keep running the race. But maybe the sleep you are searching for is waiting for you to return, not to something more modern, but to something more ancient. When the clock struck midnight, a dry crack echoed from a log breaking in the hearth fire. No one jumped awake. There was no alarm, no glowing screen, just a natural awakening, as though the body had been designed for it. In a tiny wooden house nestled among snow-laden pines, Bjorn, a farmer from Trondheim, opened his eyes, not from a nightmare, not from worry, but because it was the hour of midnight wakefulness. Tonight was colder than usual. Bjorn's breath turned to mist even inside the house. Quietly, he slipped from under the blankets and added wood to the fire, the coals hissing as if greeting him. His wife Sigrid remained asleep, curled beneath a sheepskin, her face dim in the glow of the flames. No words were needed. She knew why he was awake, because this was the sacred hour. Modern people call this the dead hour, the middle of the night, the darkest stretch of the day, when the body feels vulnerable, when sorrow slips more easily into the heart. But to the Vikings, this was the living hour, a quiet pause when the whole community might rise together, not in noise or hurry, but in a slow, shared breath between two dreams. It was not a time for great work, but for something deep and true. Bjorn lifted an oil lamp. It was not bright enough to flood the room, but just enough to guide him to the livestock pen. In the warm, dim glow, he checked the goats. One was pregnant, her belly round her breath heavy in the cold air. He stroked her nose gently, laying fresh hay at her feet. No one told him to do this. There was no checklist, no performance goals, only instinct and responsibility. Today, people might call it mindfulness. Elsewhere, Astrid, a healer, had also awakened. Beside her lay a pouch of dried herbs, valerian linden, a little root with a sweet scent. At this hour, if anyone in the village struggled with sleep, they would knock on her door. Not to buy medicine, but for her company, a warm cup of tea and a story long enough to lead the listener back into their dreams. Some called her a witch, others a healer. But to her, it was simply listening to others between their two sleeps. Midnight for the Vikings was not an accident. It was a ritual, a moment of connection, not social but primal. In the sagas, the Viking epics, dozens of stories unfold at midnight, not by chance. In Grettis' saga, the hero rises after his first sleep to inspect the weapons. In Gisli's saga, a wife wakes to pray to the god Frey, asking for peaceful dreams for her husband. Small acts yet filled with meaning, as if between the two sleeps, the world grew thin and secrets could unfold without time interrupting. Can you imagine them scrolling through their phones? Of course not. At midnight, there was no blue light, no notifications, only firelight and wind. They talked, they whispered, they made love. In some old texts, the hour between sleeps was described as the most natural time for intimacy. Not merely for biology, but because the mind was relaxed, the body was warm, and everyone else in the house was asleep. In another corner of the village, Gudrun, a weaver, sat spinning wool. This was the hour when her hands were steady, her thoughts slow, unbothered by farm work or children's cries. The threads spun in the middle of the night seemed to carry the stillness of time itself, and when they were woven into blankets and clothes, those who wore them felt a quiet peace born of the white nights of the north. She needed no deep focus or lo-fi for crafting playlist. The fire was her music. Her hands were her meditation. The strange thing is, modern science has confirmed all of this. For much of the 20th century, people believed that waking in the night was a disorder. But historian Roger E. Kirch, after studying more than 500 pre-industrial documents, proved that segmented sleep had been the human norm for thousands of years, until electric light and industrial schedules erased our natural rhythm. And now neuroscience shows that waking briefly in the night lowers cortisol, raises prolactin, calming the nervous system and deepening the next phase of sleep. So why do we not do this? Because we are afraid. Afraid that waking up means failure. Afraid that midnight wakefulness signals something broken. And when fear takes hold, paradoxically, it becomes the very reason we cannot fall back asleep. The Vikings did not have sleep anxiety. Not because they were healthier, but because they were not haunted by the idea of the perfect night's sleep. They simply slept as nature guided them. Awake meant living. Sleepy meant resting. Nothing more. Nothing less. You live in an age where midnight is when Netflix suggests next episode, when emails from another time zone flood in, and when you open your eyes at 2 a.m, instead of hearing your heartbeat, you hear notifications. You think you are making use of your time. But in truth, you are slicing your sleep into hundreds of pieces, leaving yourself weary and restless. The Vikings did not know what melatonin was. They did not need a sleep tracker app. But they had something we have lost trust in: the rhythm of their own bodies. So now, when you wake at 2 a.m, you can panic. Or you can do as Bjorn did: rise, feed the fire. Listen to the breath of the one you love. And remember that between two sleeps, the world was once this peaceful. Imagine this: you have gone to bed, turned off the lights, drawn, the curtains unplugged, the television, and yet something still glimmers. A light from the Wi-Fi router, a charging screen, or the glow of a street lamp slipping through a crack in the blinds. That is not darkness. That is a discount version of it. Because true darkness, the kind that once cradled humanity's deepest sleep, is nearly extinct. But in ancient Scandinavia, darkness was a living presence. It was not just the backdrop, it was the main character in the Viking night. Step into a Viking longhouse in the middle of winter. No windows, no electric light, no moon because thick clouds swallowed the sky. The heavy wooden door was shut tight at dusk. Inside, only the faint glow of embers kept people from stumbling into the beams, but not enough to see anyone's face clearly. That was not simply dark. That was blackness. A kind of blackness your modern eyes no longer recognize. A blackness that made your pupils spread wide open, and still you saw nothing. And it was in that blackness that the Vikings slept. In the modern world, sleep is often described as a journey into the night. But the Vikings did not need metaphors. They truly stepped into night, absolute inescapable night. And in that void, their bodies dropped into the deepest states where melatonin, the conductor of human sleep, was released in rich, steady waves untouched by interruption. Melatonin does not need to come from a pill. It only needs darkness, and true darkness begins only when the last light dies. That was what the Vikings understood, not through reason, but through the instincts of evolution. Near the coast by Bergen, archaeologists uncovered a Viking home, with walls more than 2 feet thick made of earth and straw without a single crack of light entering. The people inside lived through 14 to 16 hours of darkness each day in winter, an environment modern scientists now call perfect for physiological recovery. You may think, surely they must have suffered from winter depression. No, because when darkness is natural, not a mistake, it ceases to be a threat. The Vikings lived in darkness the way fish live in water. They were born in it. They did not fear it. And in that acceptance, darkness shifted from being an enemy into the ally of sleep. Leif, a fisherman near Tromsø reconstructed from real archaeological data, lived almost entirely in rhythm with the sun. In winter, the sun rose for only a few hours, and the rest was endless night. But Leif never rushed. He used that time to mend nets, carve spear tips, repair his boat, and when night fell, he kindled a small pile of coals inside his home, and then extinguished them. No oil lamps, no candles, because fish oil was precious, and above all, because he liked the dark. Modern scientists, in a well-known study published in the Journal of Sleep Research, brought volunteers into conditions of only natural light for a week. No electronics. The result, their sleep cycles completely reset. Melatonin surged, and they fell asleep faster, deeper. The Vikings never needed research. They lived that way every day of their lives. You might protest, but did they not use oil lamps? Yes. But their light was different. Whale oil lamps, beeswax candles, glowing coals. All of them gave off light in the red-yellow spectrum, the kind that does not suppress melatonin. By contrast, the blue light of phones, computers, and LED bulbs is the #1 enemy of sleep. Just 10 minutes of it can delay sleep for hours. The Vikings had no blue light filters, because their light never betrayed them. Astrid, the wife of a local chieftain, would burn a bundle of dried lavender before bed, not because she knew about vasodilation, blood pressure reduction, or sleep support, but because her mother had done it. And her grandmother, too. It was not a technique. It was a ritual. A way of telling the darkness I am ready. Darkness in the Viking world was not frightening. It was sacred. In Norse belief, darkness did not mean demons. It was part of the cosmic order. Night was when the spirits of ancestors returned, when dreams carried prophecies, when everything stopped moving, so you could hear your own heartbeat again. Today, you switch on night mode on your phone, as if the world knows you need dimming. But you still cannot dim yourself. Because true darkness is not about brightness, it is about surrender. The Vikings did not try to sleep. They let themselves fall into it. And to do that, they needed darkness. It is no accident that in archaeology, Viking beds are always found in the farthest, darkest corners of the house. Not out of fear of light, but out of respect for sleep. Sleep was something to be sheltered, like a ritual not to be disturbed. Today, light pours into even the deepest corners of the night. 80% of the world's population now lives under light-polluted skies, where you cannot see the stars anymore. But the Vikings, every night, slept under roofs with no lamps, no windows, and sometimes no roof at all. Only the dome of stars, the call of owls, and a darkness deep enough for ancient dreams to drift back. You can buy $1 million mattress, download guided meditation apps, sip caffeine-free tea, but without darkness, true absolute primal darkness, you are only simulating sleep. Leaf did not need simulation. Astrid did not need tools. And you, if you dare to turn everything off for one night, may find the deepest sleep is not in medicine, but in something simple we have forgotten: darkness. The mattress you lie on, maybe it's climate-controlled orthopedic memory foam, even infused with lavender scent, is really just an expensive cocktail of technology, marketing, and desperation. Because you still toss and turn at night. You still wake with a stiff neck, a sore back, or that strange hollow feeling you can't quite name. And the Vikings, they slept on straw, sheepskin, and solid wood. And maybe they slept better than you. In the longhouse at Hedeby, night falls fast and cold. But in the farthest corner, pressed against the north wall, stands Thorvald's bed. Not a four-legged frame on the floor, but a raised wooden platform layered with thick sheepskin, and beneath it straw. Not dumped, but carefully woven into an airy cushion. No springs, no foam. Yet there was warmth from the hearth nearby, the breathing of the wife at his side, and the calm of a body resting in a posture unbent by artificial angles. You may think straw must be scratchy. How could they sleep on that? But the straw was replaced often, dry clean with a natural spring to it. It didn't trap heat the way foam does. Instead, it breathed, keeping the body dry through the long winter. More importantly, it never tried to hug you. It only supported you, exactly where you needed it. Today, ergonomics is an entire industry. Chairs tilted at 45 degrees, standing desks, U-shaped travel pillows. But the Vikings had no vocabulary for posture. They didn't sleep to optimize life quality. They slept to survive. And that pure necessity led them to the most natural position of all. Picture Leaf after a day rowing in icy seas, his back, bent shoulders, sore knees swollen from the cold. He needed no hot stone massage, just straw beneath him and a block of wood wrapped in leather beneath his head, firm but keeping his neck in line with his spine. Through the night, his muscles eased back toward neutral. Nothing was too soft to sink into, nothing too rigid to push against him. By dawn, he rose like a reed, dried and straightened by the night. And not just the bed. The blankets were different too. Viking blankets weren't heavy quilts. They were sheepskins stitched together, light, warm, and naturally breathable. Not by technology, but by design of nature hollow wool fibers that trapped heat, but let the body breathe so sleep never turned stifling. The comforter you wrap yourself in, to a Viking, it would have seemed unnecessary. High in the western mountains, archaeologists found a cover made of bison hair, not for luxury but for survival in 30-degree winters. The fibers were so thick that a single layer could block the wind seeping through wooden walls. At night, 3 generations shared one blanket. Not out of lack, but because it was the most efficient way to keep warm. A human body is a furnace, and warmth was never wasted. From a modern view, sharing a bed with 4 or 5 others sounds unbearable. But for Gudrun, a 62-year-old woman from the trading town of Burka, it was joy. When I sleep alone, I hear my heartbeat, uneven, restless. When I sleep beside my granddaughter, I hear her breath and my heart settles. She never wore a sleep tracker, yet she felt what modern science has only just confirmed, that sleeping beside others slows the heart, lowers blood pressure, and raises oxytocin, the hormone of safety and closeness. Today, you optimize sleep with gadgets. The Vikings optimized with instinct. They chose the draftless corner, put beds farthest from the door, and faced their heads east, toward the sunrise. Not out of philosophy, but because dawn would wake them gently. No alarms, no buzzers, just light sliding through wood. Bjorn, a farmer in Upland, rose each morning not to an alarm, but to the crow of a rooster. His body had rested enough. He did not force himself awake, nor did he linger. He had never heard of RM cycles, yet he lived his entire life with the perfect balance of deep sleep and dream sleep undisturbed by technology. You may object, but I need softness to relax. The problem is, too much softness does not relax you. It bends you, twists you, warps you, and no one tells you that. Because a mattress industry worth billions cannot profit if you sleep soundly on straw. So they sell you smart beds that track your heart rate and adjust firmness by side of body. A Viking would only shrug and ask, why not just sleep the way your body was made to? They did not fight sleep. They did not try to hack it. They trusted their bodies and let sleep happen as the natural continuation of the day. And when you lie on straw in darkness with the smell of wool and the sound of breathing from those you love, you need no alarm clock. Because you are not running a race. You do not sleep to work. You sleep to live. Imagine stepping into a Viking longhouse. Thick timber walls, a roof blanketed in snow, the only light the fading glow of embers. Inside, 15 people lie asleep, pressed shoulder to shoulder, legs, tangled, their breathing rising and falling like a midnight symphony. No headphones, no alarms, and no one is bothered. You might call this a loss of privacy. The Vikings would laugh. To them, sleep was survival, not a personal luxury. On the icy high plains near Jämtland, winter lasted half the year with nights that plunged to 30 degrees. In that cold, sleeping alone wasn't just lonely. It was dangerous. Gunnar, a middle-aged warrior, never slept without someone touching him. His wife on one side, his youngest son on the other, an old hunting dog curled at his feet. The heat of bodies, human and animal, wove together into a living furnace. No device could ever imitate that. You might be surprised, but the idea of sleeping alone in your own locked bedroom is shockingly new. It wasn't until the rise of the modern middle class a few hundred years ago that personal space became the norm. For thousands of years before, from Asia to Europe, grasslands to forests, humans slept together. Not out of poverty, out of necessity. To stay alive, to stay sane. A study from the University of Colorado shows that when you share a bed, your heart rate drops by 4 to 6 beats per minute, and stress hormones like cortisol dip sharply. But the Vikings didn't need a lab report to tell them this. They felt it. In the warmth of a wife's embrace, in the sound of a child's breath, in the comfort of knowing someone was close. They fell asleep faster, slept deeper, and woke steadier than any modern therapy could promise. In the longhouse, where families, blacksmiths, farmers, and even livestock lived together, sleep was a communal event. No curtains, no doors, but no one felt intruded upon. Privacy wasn't measured in square feet, but in awareness. Respect was carried in silence, in gestures and glances across the dark. No walls were needed. Culture was enough. Maybe the idea unsettles you, but think back. The best sleep of your life may have been, as a child, pressed against your mother, soothed by the rhythm of her heartbeat. You didn't need melatonin, white noise, or a bedtime podcast. That feeling, the Vikings had a word for it, ligja saman. Not just lying next to each other, but belonging together. Gudrun, the village storyteller, once confessed, "After my husband died, I still went to bed. But I did not sleep. I only closed my eyes." That's the quiet tragedy of millions today. They believe they're sleeping, but really they're just lying still, alone, enduring. The Vikings didn't endure. They shared. Their sleep, their darkness, their warmth, their fears. When a snowstorm hit, no one slept apart. When word came of raiders, they pulled closer together. Not because they were weak, because they knew strength is not standing alone. Strength is knowing when to lean on others. In Norse myth, there's a saying, "The one who wakes alone dies in silence." That wasn't philosophy, it was reality. Even the gods in the old stories slept beside one another. In Valhalla, the warriors' beds are lined in endless rows, shoulders touching, waiting for Ragnarok. Even paradise did not give you a private room. Today, sleep has become a private affair. You shut the door, turn off the lights, and separate yourself from the world. But the price is this: you also separate yourself from people. And when you wake at 3 a.m., heart racing, sweat cold, you face the fear alone. No one beside you to whisper, "I'm awake too." It's okay. Communal sleep was never about scarcity. It was connection. A spiritual thread woven from real breath, real heartbeats, real skin. Not emojis, not a good night text. Presence. Physical presence. Something the Vikings understood better than almost anyone. Astrid, the village healer, once told a young mother, "If you can't sleep, don't go to the fire. Hold your baby. Listen to it breathe. You'll both sleep again." She had no PhD in psychology, but she knew closeness is the strongest sleeping pill of all. You can own an air conditioner, a Japanese spring mattress, an electric blanket, but without a hand on your back, without warm breath in your ear, you'll still feel cold, and maybe you'll never really sleep. The Vikings didn't need private rooms. They needed each other. On the edge of Björgvin, where the sea wind sighed through the pines like the breath of Thor himself, there stood a small house roofed with moss and earth. No smoke, no sound. But if you came there at night, you would see a faint orange glow from a whale oil lamp, and you would smell something strange: damp soil, pine resin, wild lavender, and the warm bite of dried valerian root. It was the home of Astrid, a woman with no title in the village council, but anyone who struggled with sleep childbirth or haunting dreams came to her. She did not call herself a healer. People called her the woman who knew sleep. Astrid wrote no books. She measured no hormones. But she knew when a mother slept less, because she feared her baby might die in the night. She knew when a man stayed awake not from the cold, but because his dead father's voice returned in every dream. And she knew what to do, not with needles, but with herbs with her hands, and with stories told in the thinnest hours of the night. Her garden was not for flowers. It was only for medicine. Valerian to quiet the mind, linden to slow the heart, chamomile to soothe the stomach. Their scent rose from every leaf and stem so strong that when you entered, you felt drowsy, not because of chemistry, but because of memory. The body remembered it once slept with these scents in the womb when lullabies were made of herbs instead of YouTube ads. On long winter nights when the village seemed deeply asleep, there was always a knock at Astrid's door. Gentle. 3 times. She would open. She never asked. She only looked. And she knew. Once it was a young warrior restless after his first raid. Not because of blood, but because when he lay down, he heard the voice of the man he had killed. That voice did not curse him. It only whispered, "You live in my place." Astrid did not lecture him. She handed him a small pouch of apple bark dried mint and a pinch of skullcap. "Hang it by your bed. Sleep on the ground tonight." He obeyed. That night he heard no voice, only fire. The Vikings had no hospitals, no clinical psychology. But they had women like Astrid, who knew that sometimes sleep does not need to be explained, it needs to be held. She once soothed a premature newborn by placing it on its father's chest, wrapped in animal fur and fanning both of their breathing with a pinch of burning thyme. The baby slept. The father wept. No words were needed. Today we believe sleep medicine comes in a pill or a number on a smartwatch. Astrid knew the real prescription was rhythm. The light fading lower, the air growing cooler, the scent of herbs rising stronger, and then a story. Yes, a story. She spoke without looking, without stopping. The story had no ending, no climax. It simply drifted like a river, carrying the listener's mind away from the shore of waking. By morning, you did not remember her words, only that you had truly slept. And if you think that is mysticism, listen to neuroscience. Lavender increases alpha waves in the brain, the waves of deep relaxation. Valerian activates GABA, the neurotransmitter that quiets anxiety. Skullcap, a wild plant of the north, slows the heart within 15 minutes. Astrid had no laboratory, but she watched each night as eyes grew heavy, breathing slowed, and sleep came, unresisted. Another night, a widow came to her door. "I dream of my husband every night. He stands outside the door. He does not come in." Astrid asked no questions. She brewed tea with melted mountain ice boiled in clay with a pinch of angelica root. The herb believed to bridge this world and the next. She laid her hand gently on the woman's back, not pressing, only resting. She whispered, "Tonight, if he knocks open the door." That night, the widow dreamed her husband stepped inside, sat by her bed, said nothing. She slept until morning. For the Vikings, sleep was not just rest. It was a journey. Through memory, through spirit, through dark passages forbidden by daylight. And to walk that path, they needed guides, not doctors. Women who understood the dark. Astrid never asked, "How many hours did you sleep?" She asked, "How do you feel when you wake today? You might sleep 8 hours and still wake exhausted, because you were never soothed. No hand rested on your back. No breath of herbs lingered in the air. No one sat beside you telling a story they never meant to finish. And so, you did not sleep. You only lay still." The Vikings made no hard line between dream and waking. They lived in both. Sleep was not a break. It was the place where truths unspoken by day could finally surface. And Astrid, in her moss-covered home, was the bridge between those two worlds. You can turn to technology, But someday, you may need an Astrid. Someone who can look at you and know what you need to sleep again like a child, once cradled by the forest, the wind and dreams that came not in human form, but in the shape of roots. When Thorvald felt his breath grow short, he said nothing. He only looked at the night sky through the gap in the roof, where the clouds had cleared just enough for a single star to shine through. Not brilliant, but steady, like the silent eye of an ancestor watching from above. He lay on his side as he had on so many nights before, one hand resting on his chest, the other tucked beneath a straw pillow softened by years. The smell of burned wool, cold ash, and sheepskin filled his nose. So familiar it felt. Safe. No tubes, no wires. Only night darkness and stillness. No one knew it was the last night. But Astrid, the woman who always knew sleep before it came, had slipped a small pouch beneath his pillow at dusk angelica apple bark and crushed valerian root. She said nothing. She did not need to. For Thorvald, the man who had rowed across the Baltic, carried a bloodied axe through the snows of Skåne, who had loved 3 women and regretted none, now needed only sleep. Inside the longhouse, the family had also drifted off. No one kept watch. No crying. The youngest grandchild curled in his mother's arms, breath fluttering. The old dog, once Thorvald's hunting companion, lay at the foot of the bed, whimpering softly in dreams. It was not a departure. It was a return to night, to forest, to dreams that never break. The Vikings believed that when a warrior died in his sleep, the soul did not rise straight to Valhalla, but passed first through a forest. A thick, dark, frozen wood where every step pressed moss to a hushed crackle, and the wind carried whispers of those who had gone before. Thorvald had once dreamed of that forest. He told Astrid, "When I die, do not call the gods. Burn oak. Let me find my way." And that night, she burned oak, not much, just enough for the sweet smoke to slip into the folds of memory. No one touched him as his last breath left. They knew he did not wish to be pulled back. In the morning when the others awoke, there were no screams, no wails, only kneeling by his bed, hands on his forehead, cold yet calm. Dawn's light fell across his face, softening the wrinkles. They were no longer lines of age, but rivers of time carved into the face of a man who had lived enough. The Vikings did not fear death. They feared unfinished death. To die before love was spoken. To die holding bitterness. To die without one last touch. Thorvald was different. He died as he had lived, like sleep. Not because sickness defeated him, but because his body, after so many years lived, rightly knew when to rest. That death was not announced, but it spread like mist. The whole village knew. Everyone knew. And no one hurried. By nightfall, they gathered in the longhouse, not for ritual, but to sleep beside him one last time. They did not raise other beds. They laid straw beside his, wrapped themselves in old blankets, bodies pressed close. No ceremony, only breath and oak smoke. They told their dreams of him. One saw him rowing. One saw him laughing with axe in hand. Another had no dream at all, only felt the chest lighten as if setting down a stone carried for a lifetime. Death, when surrounded by darkness, herbs, and human warmth, was no longer something to fear. It became a soft doorway. A single time you are allowed to sleep without being called back. At dawn, they placed him in a small wooden boat. No sail, no oars. Only a bundle of oak, an old shield, and a piece of cloth still carrying the scent of sweat. What Astrid called a way for the soul not to forget the smell of the living. They pushed the boat onto the lake. The water lay flat as glass mist curling above it. The sun had not yet fully risen. And then, without a word, they let the boat drift. No fire, no drums, no tears. You might think that was a cold funeral. But no, it was simply sleep continued, in the way the Vikings believed that life is only the beginning of a longer dream. Thorvald slept, and they let him sleep. Today, when someone dies, we fight to the last minute, tubes, pumps, chest compressions, then deliver the news with mechanical words. But the Vikings understood there are sleeps that must not be interrupted, nights that do not need alarms. You fear death because you have not yet learned to sleep. You wake in panic at night because you have forgotten how to be still. Thorvald, who knew how to fight, how to love, how to forgive, was also the man who knew how to leave in silence. And that was his final lesson: if you live your life in rhythm with the land, with people, with night itself, then your last sleep will not be frightening. It will come like an old friend sitting at your bedside, brushing your forehead, whispering, "Sleep now. Do not wake again." Welcome to the most important day of your life. Not graduation, not childbirth, but getting married in the year 1875. You open your eyes on a grand Victorian bed, glorious if you overlook the musty straw mattress and a fur blanket as heavy as generational trauma. No alarm clock, only the toll of church bells ringing like a summons for your soul. No coffee, no Google Calendar chirping wedding day, only the booming voice of the housekeeper. Are you awake? You are getting married today. Yes, today you become a princess, literally a prisoner in lace. You sit up, your head heavy as if someone had poured beeswax directly into your skull. Well, close enough. Last night your hair was wrapped in meters of wax-soaked cloth to create those natural curls by morning. Naturally, it burned your scalp. You have not brushed your teeth, no one in the house has, with what charcoal powder boiled goat urine. Best to keep your mouth shut if you do not want to cause a mass extinction event with your breath. The maids drag you from bed like a frozen slab of meat. They shove you into a chair and begin the beautification ritual, which really means trying not to kill you with cosmetics. First comes face powder. Not the kind you know. This is death dust, a delicate blend of arsenic and lead finely milled and liberally applied. The goal to make your face so pale, you look freshly dug from a cemetery. Pale skin is noble, they say. Pale like a corpse, they do not say. But you feel it. Then comes the blush. Not a gentle flush of joy, but a violent red that says I have applied crushed brick dust to my cheeks, and I am internally bleeding. Your eyes are watering from the candle smoke burning just inches from your face. But you must stay still. Even a slight twitch, and the charcoal eyeliner might turn you from bride to Halloween mascot. You think about asking for a glass of water. Wrong move. Victorian women do not ask. They smile in quiet desperation. The maids circle around you like ants sculpting a statue, the statue of glorious sacrifice. Each tug of the comb tears away a piece of your soul. Each hairpin jab brings you closer to the afterlife. But do not sweat literally. Sweating is vulgar, even though you are wrapped in high-necked wool in a room with no fan. You look in the mirror, a ghostly white face, blood-red lips, cold, dark eyes. You do not see yourself. You see a haunting version of someone who once dreamed of being an artist. You silently ask, "Why am I doing this?" No one answers, because the answer lies in a 3-page dowry letter and a 500-pound ring. Then your mother walks in. She wears lace, holds a fan. Her face as cold as a rule book. "You look beautiful," she says. "Today you will make the family proud." You want to say, I want to be free. I have only met my husband 3 times. I cannot breathe, the corset is squeezing my liver. But you only say, yes, mother. When all is done, they pull you to your feet. Your head spins, your hands are ice, your vision blurs, but your lips must smile. They drape a veil over you, long as your destiny. A maid asks, would you like to use the bathroom before we put on the dress? You shake your head. Mistake number 1 of your life. But you will not realize that until the next chapter. You step out of the room. The hallway stretches before you like a judgment altar. At the end stands your father ready to hand you off to another man. You remember your childhood, the drawings you made, the dolls you stitched, the poems you wrote in a notebook hidden under your pillow. Now they are memories, replaced by the only identity you are allowed from now on, somebody's wife. The church bell rings again. Not a wedding bell. A bell tolling your departure from yourself. Are you ready? It does not matter. Because your big day does not wait for your clarity. It only needs you to be beautiful, obedient, and silent. And so, the princess walks to the altar, not to live happily ever after, but to begin her leading role in a glittering tragedy. Congratulations. After surviving a makeover with lethal chemicals, it is time for the main event of your wedding day, the dressing. Sounds poetic, does it not? But this is not a fairy tale scene of a princess twirling through cherry blossoms. This is hand-to-hand combat with lace steel and 12 kilograms of spiritual weight that is about 26 pounds. It all begins with someone shouting, "Bring out the corset." If you have never worn a Victorian corset, imagine being shoved into a fabric pipe and twisted tight with rope until your ribs surrender. A maid plants her knee in your back and yanks the laces like she is trying to tie ice skates onto an elephant. You hear a faint crack. Not the corset. Your bones. Next comes the chemise, a thin linen undergarment. Its main job is to absorb all the sweat you are going to produce in a long day of semi-conscious survival. You are slowly transforming into a multi-layered cake, and this frosting absorbs moisture like a sponge. But do not think it is over. Welcome to the crinoline, a bell-shaped steel cage worn under the skirt to give it that noble silhouette. Sounds fancy, right? Until you try to pass through a narrow doorway and get stuck like a camel in the eye of a needle. Every turn feels like you are steering a windmill with your hips. Doors, chairs, banquet tables, everything is now an obstacle course. And if anyone stands too close, apologies. You might accidentally knock them out with your rear. Next comes the bustle, a giant padded cushion tied to your back to lift the hips. In 1875, the bigger the backside, the more aristocratic you were. You no longer know what part of your body is real. You only know that from the chest down, you are a handcrafted art installation. Now for the main gown, a white wedding dress adorned with lace pearls and the karma of your ancestors. It takes 3 maids to lift it and 1 to keep the veil from getting sucked into the ceiling fan. You stand in the middle of the room, arms outstretched like a prisoner being prepped for transport, and they drop the dress over you like a birdcage. In total, over 6 layers of fabric, nearly 26 pounds in weight, or about 12 kilograms, as cumbersome as a camping tent, and 0 ability to sit down without industrial equipment. You try taking a step. Mistake. Your foot tangles in the crinoline. The dress drags the floor. The veil wraps around your hair. You feel like you are wearing a silk octopus trying to strangle you with elegance. Sweat begins to pour, though you must never let it show. Victorian women do not sweat. They glisten with restraint. Sit down, not an option. To sit, you would need a high stool, 2 people to lift the dress, and a brief prayer. Bend over, forget it. The corset blocks all movement. Bending means blackout. Breathe, you are no longer sure. Breathing now feels like sipping air through a straw clogged with ice. You develop a new skill, breathing through your eyes. Someone asks you, "Is the bride all right?" You smile and whisper yes while screaming for help in a frequency only dogs can hear. Every step is a psychological victory. Every corset squeeze is a reminder you belong to someone. Now you are no longer yours. You feel something rise, not emotion. Stomach acid because your breakfast was a dry biscuit and a sip of traditional spring water, which is diluted beer. Someone pins the veil to your head, a trail of silk so long that if the wind caught it, you could take flight like a kite. You stand there like a goddess in captivity, surrounded by flowers, candles, and judging eyes. Everyone marvels at your beauty. No one asks, "Can she breathe? Is her sciatic nerve still functioning? Is she even conscious?" You begin to tremble. Not from emotion, but because circulation has ceased in your lower body. Still, you smile. It is a survival skill. Do not smile, and they say you are arrogant. Smile too broadly, and they say you lack class, so you choose. A soft smile, not too happy, not too pained, the smile of a hostage preserving family honor. At that moment, your mother enters. You look beautiful, like a fairy. You want to say, "I cannot breathe. I am dying slowly inside this silk. I may urinate in this dress if the ceremony lasts over 3 hours." But you only say, "Thank you, mother." You take one step out of the room. The sound of your dress dragging across stone floors echoes like a funeral dirge for your waist. Each step asks a question: am I walking toward a wedding? Or the burial of my identity? And you realize, this is not fashion. This is control. The Victorian wedding gown was not just made to look beautiful. It was engineered so you could not run, could not bow, could not speak too loudly, and could not rebel. And so you walk down the aisle, one 26-pound step at a time. You do not dare sit. You do not dare breathe. You do not dare think. There is only one thing you dare to do. Exist in silence beneath the lace that weighs as much as your fate. Welcome to the very heart of every Victorian girl's dream. A fairy tale wedding, a radiant chapel, a crowd watching you closely, waiting to see whether you faint during the hymn or right after the vows. You are standing, no propped upright. Your wedding dress weighs more than an overstuffed suitcase. The corset is so tight, your lungs are beginning to evolve into those of a goldfish. Blood is no longer reaching your legs. It is pooling at pressure points, specifically your toes, ankles, and the general region of your soul. The church is packed. Candles flicker, fresh flowers bloom, the organ booms. Everyone smiles at you. No one realizes the bride before them is slowly losing vision due to lack of oxygen to the brain. But beautiful. What matters is that you still look beautiful. The priest begins the ceremony. You can no longer make out what he is saying, just a melodic drone like a Latin instruction manual for home appliances. Still, you must listen. Because he is formally announcing the terms of a human transfer from free girl to legal property of husband. The wife shall obey, nod, serve, nod again, and bear children. You smile. Though really it is your facial muscles spasming from electrolyte loss. The vows do not ask if you love him. They only ask if you are willing to accept unpaid lifetime responsibility. You glance at the groom. He is smiling, not from joy, but because he has just legally acquired a package labeled nullified feminism. He now controls where you live, whom you meet, and whether or not you may take a walk. You try to stay upright. With every passing minute, your legs feel more like soft wax candles. You subtly shift your weight to relieve the numbness. Mistake. The crinoline tilts. The dress veers right. You now resemble a chandelier losing balance at the gala of nightmares. The priest calls you forward for the ring exchange. You take one step. Your vision blurs. Your heart races. You are not sure whether you are entering marriage or a pre-fainting state. And then you freeze. The world spins around you like a carnival wheel of fate. You hear a voice distant, "Is the bride all right?" You do not answer, because you are too busy fainting in silence. But do not worry. Everyone has rehearsed this. A maid catches your gown. An aunt steadies your back. They perform the bridal rescue like ballet dancers. No one panics. Fainting during the ceremony is the unofficial part of the ritual. You are revived with a sniff of smelling salts. The Victorian miracle powder that wakes women just long enough to endure a bit more. You open your eyes, blurry from the light streaming through stained glass. You hear murmurs from the pews. An older woman whispers, "She is frail, must not have eaten." No one says, maybe it is because she was forced to marry while wrapped in 26 pounds of fabric or about 12 kilograms. You are helped to your feet again. No one asks if you wish to continue. This is not about what you wish. It is about what you complete. The ceremony continues as if a minor physiological collapse had not just occurred. The priest returns to his book. He resumes reading. You resume standing, propped up by the will of your ancestors. Then comes the kiss, the so-called pinnacle of romance. Did you know? This first kiss after the vows was often only the second kiss of your life, the first being from your father wishing you good luck. You close your eyes, waiting for emotion. All you feel is a sharp pain in your back. The corset has reached its structural limit. Your husband leans down and kisses your forehead like sealing a limited edition doll. Applause erupts. Not for love, but for proper execution. No one died, no one objected, and the bride remained upright. You walk away hand in hand with your new husband. Each step is a small miracle. No dress tangles. You do not fall. Your face does not twitch. Wonderful. Except, you still have not gone to the restroom. And now the ceremony is over. The reception still has 4 hours to go. You sit at the head table. The lights sparkle. The wine flows. The music plays softly. You look around. People are laughing and talking. You think only of a toilet. But no, there is no toilet. Just a small chamber deep in the garden, locked behind distance decorum and dress architecture. You smile at guests, raise your glass, offer polite nods. You wear the expression of a brainwashed goddess of destruction. Your wedding day is complete. Not like a dream. More like an unmedicated surgery staged under candlelight and roses. And you are still alive. Not because you are strong, but because there is no other choice. You look at him. The man standing beside you, hand in hand, before an aging priest and 60 guests draped in white lace clapping thunderously. He is smiling. And you are marrying a man you do not know. Well, technically, you have met him before. Twice. The first time was at a tea gathering your mother arranged, where every sentence began with, "How many acres does your family own?" The second time was today, when he stepped out of the carriage, adjusted his collar, and asked the servant, "Is she fair-skinned?" My father told me to marry someone not too tanned. You smile, not because it is funny, but because smiling is a form of survival. Love notes affection. Not even that. This is a transaction. You are the dowry bundled with conditions, wrapped in lace, veiled and stripped of the right to say no. They said he was a good match. Your father nodded. Your mother smiled. He has a house, a title, a candle in the church carved with his surname going back 3 generations. And you have eggs in your womb and a family in debt from rebuilding the stables. You are not marrying a man. You are marrying a structure, a skeleton assembled from pounds, power, property, and a desire to control women through weddings and inheritance law. From this day forward, everything you do will require this man's signature. You want to write a letter, he can open it. You want to sell your embroidery, ask your husband. You want a divorce. Sorry. Victorian law does not have an undo button, only an escape route through scandal madness or a coffin. You remember once dreaming of romantic love, a man who read poetry, picked flowers, and asked, "Are you all right?" Now you realize he does not need to know if you are all right. He only needs to know that you have been legally transferred from your father to him. You study him closely, his tailored suit, his neatly combed hair, the gold ring on his hand. A model gentleman. But inside, a vessel of privilege poured into him since birth. From childhood he was taught, women are to be married. Wives are to be managed. Children are to carry on the name. Love. That is something to keep on the side with the maids. You ask yourself, how can he own my entire future by saying I do once the answer is, because society allows him. The law names him head of household. You are the dependent. The property, the children, even your own body someday will belong to a man you only know enjoys roasted venison and tends to hiccup when nervous. Maybe he is not cruel. Maybe he is also a victim of the system. But that system has never laced a corset into his lungs, never told him to stay silent when he wanted to say no, never tossed him into a wedding like a perfumed goat at auction. Maybe he will be kind, but you are not marrying kindness. You are marrying his power over you. And that power is never split in half. You remember signing the marriage registry. There was no section for bride's opinion, only a list of assets. £3,000, 1 secondary villa, 6 silk gowns, and a wife who can sew. You sat there listening as both families discussed you like they were co-investing in a breeding horse. The wedding reception begins. He raises a glass and says, "I am so fortunate to have such a wonderful wife." The room bursts into applause. No one hears, "I have just purchased a reproductive investment." You smile, raise your glass. Inside, you are cold like a wedding dress left overnight in a crypt. You want to ask him something just softly. If I do not love you, could you give me back? But you already know the answer. No, he cannot. Because you are not a person. You are a part of the ceremony. Like the cake, the candles, the dowry. You look at your new husband, and you wonder if this is the beginning of love. Why does it feel so much like the start of a prison sentence? You are standing in the middle of a lavish wedding reception. Crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing, violin music drifting from a balcony. Everyone thinks you are living the most beautiful moment of your life. But the truth is, you need to urinate. It began around the 3rd hour of the ceremony, right after the vows and just before the wedding cake made its grand entrance. You first felt it subtle, like the initial knock of the devil at your bladder's door. You ignored it. Mistake number 1. Because you are currently wearing a configuration never meant for someone with a urinary system. A corset cinched with the precision of medieval torture. A crinoline as wide as a circus tent. A gown as long, heavy, and layered as a national debt. And underneath, nothing that can be removed with ease. Want to relieve yourself, you will need a professional disrobing crew, a candle, an uninterrupted hour, and a miracle from Saint Lavatory, the unsung deity of the Victorian age. You glance around, seeking hope. There is no restroom. In that era, wedding venues did not come with indoor toilets. If you wish to release, you must cross a lawn past the stables, then turn left at the rose bush where there is a wooden shed. No light, no lock, no water, no hope. But you cannot go. Not because you do not know the way, but because your dress does not bend. You try whispering to your trusted maid, "I need a moment of privacy." She looks at you as if you just suggested stripping nude at the dinner table. You cannot, ma'am. Not during the reception. Not in that gown. You swallow your words. And your urine. The discomfort shifts from gentle twinge to numbness below the navel. You dare not laugh. A hearty chuckle might breach the dam. You dare not cough. A cough is an internal earthquake. You can only stand, breathe shallowly, and clench like a goddess of bladder discipline. Guests approach to chat. You smile, nod. Holding a glass of wine you do not dare to sip because each drop is a bullet straight to your bladder. You become a living sculpture, beautiful, silent, and on the verge of leakage. The music swells. Someone raises a glass. A toast to the bride cheers. Clinking glasses. The sound of your bladder echoing inside you like a war drum. You no longer know if it is tears or sweat dripping down your temple. You only know every movement now is a game of Russian roulette. You attempt to sit. Impossible. The dress is too wide. You try tiptoeing. Mistake. The pressure surges below. You distract yourself by thinking of the ocean catastrophic, like conjuring Niagara Falls in your imagination. Your husband walks over, kisses your cheek. You try not to tremble, not from emotion, but because your pelvic muscles are strung tighter than harp strings. He says, "You seem quiet." You respond, "I am savoring the moment." The truth is, 98% of your brain is currently engaged in pelvic restraint. Children begin to run around. A little girl grabs your hand, beaming, "Miss Bride, will you dance with us?" You smile. Then gently decline with a whispered, "I am reflecting on the meaning of marriage." In reality, you are calculating if you dance, the skirt flies, pressure spikes, and the result will be a moist cloud beneath layers of lace. You picture yourself in a modern restroom. Bright. Running water. A door with a lock. Toilet paper. You cry. No one knows why. They assume you are overwhelmed with joy. They do not know. You just want to pee. Time moves like a stalled train. Finally, you can take no more. You clutch your maid's hand and whisper, "No matter what happens, I need to go." Right. Now. She nods. Understood. The operation begins like a hostage extraction during wartime. You are led out back, shielded from guests' view. She plus 2 others begin dismantling the fortress of fabric. Corset, 5 minutes. Bustle, 3 minutes. Crinoline, 2 minutes. Outer gown requires 4 hands and a prayer. Total time, 15 minutes. Each second, a battle between dignity and chronic urination. At last, you sit down. No throne, no candlelight. Just a wooden box and the pure bliss of freedom cascading like a waterfall. You look up to the sky, exhale, nearly weep. You have not just urinated. You have reclaimed autonomy over a part of your own body. And then, you must dress again. From the beginning. To rejoin the celebration. Because who cares if the bride got to relieve herself as long as she still looks like a virgin goddess wading through a swamp of sweat? You sit at the banquet table, or more accurately, you are placed there like a prized exhibit. The finely carved wooden chair groans not from your body weight, but from the corset and the layers upon layers of fabric compressing your form into something resembling atomic density. The banquet stretches to the horizon. Dazzling chandeliers, flickering candlelight, food arranged like a Baroque painting, stuffed pheasant, cured meats, raisin pudding, quivering clear jelly, grapes imported from Greece, oranges from Spain, and you, the only bride who has not touched a single bite because you are seated at the wrong angle for your dress. You try to shift slightly. Mistake. A distinct crack echoes, not sure whether it came from your crinoline, your sixth rib, or the chair itself. You freeze. All eyes at the table turn toward you. You smile. The kind of smile that says, I did not just pass gas, I am simply being gently suffocated. A servant places a plate of venison with plum sauce before you. It smells divine. Your eyes glisten. Your stomach running all day on diluted beer, and 3 spoonfuls of tears howls like winter wolves. You pick up your knife and fork like a duchess. Cut a tiny piece, smaller than a coin, because anything larger might cause you to hiccup, since there is no escape path for air thanks to the corset. Tear up because your abdominal nerves have issued a code red from being seated so rigidly. Pop a chest seam, as even one more bite of mashed peas could launch your bodice like a New Year's firework. You bring the piece to your lips. Chew 17 times. Swallow. Your throat is drier than aristocratic morals. You lift your wine glass. Touch it to your lips. Sip gently. The sharp taste of vintage champagne trickles down your throat. You nearly cough. But you must not. Because if you cough, you will shake loose your veil, awaken a dormant nerve in your lower back, and risk spilling vintage champagne onto a 400-pound rental wedding dress. You sit straight as a sword, back aching, shoulders locked, neck stiff, your stomach spasming in silent protest. The woman beside you, a countess with golden teeth, leans over and asks, "Is the bride enjoying the steamed fish?" You smile and reply softly, "Delightful, madam. In truth, you have not touched it." The fish is slippery, the silverware slick, and you fear an accident that could result in someone's untimely death by fork. Glasses clink. Someone raises a toast to the happy couple. You raise yours. Your smile perfect. Your hand trembling like a message from your body to your brain that says, we are at full capacity. I cannot process another cube of cheese. Dessert arrives. Raisin pudding, apple pie flan, and a wobbly mound, possibly jelly, possibly the 19th century concept of faith. You look. You swallow carefully, having learned in a previous chapter that all liquids are enemies of the bladder. You do not eat, because if you do, you might bloat, hiccup, suffocate, or worse, pass gas during a violin solo. Throughout the banquet, you become a living centerpiece, every eye watching you. Every compliment beginning with, "She looks magnificent," not one ending with, "Is she still conscious?" Every motion you make, from lifting a glass to adjusting your veil, is scrutinized like a sacred ritual. You glance at your husband. He is eating, really eating, chewing bread, carving meat, laughing loudly. No corset, no dress. No one cares if he just swallowed an entire onion. You watch him like he is the last free man in a universe made of taffeta. There is a burst of giggles. A noble child reaches over and dips their fingers into your pudding. You smile, not because it is cute, but because now you have a valid reason not to eat anymore. The banquet stretches on like a well-meaning blessing from someone you barely know, long, heavy, and ultimately incomprehensible. You have been sitting here for 2 hours. Your body has sent 9 silent SOS signals. You have not eaten properly. You have not breathed fully. You have not stood up. But you are still smiling. Because that is the only thing a bride is allowed to do without breaching decorum. The feast nears its end. You glance at your plate. A piece of cake. A slice of meat. A half-formed dream about a steaming bowl of pho on a rainy night in the year 2024. You do not know why you dreamt it. You rise and the entire hall erupts in applause. Not because you have finished your meal, but because you did not collapse, faint, or vomit into the corset. The next morning. Sunlight slips through the lace curtains, falling onto your hair now as tangled as your emotions. You open your eyes. Sore, numb, silent. Your husband is still asleep. His mouth slightly open. His breathing steady. You look at him the way one looks at a statue, beautiful, rigid, and entirely irrelevant once its decorative function has been fulfilled. You sit up. Your body aches, not from passion, but from a ritual no one taught you. No one asked if you were ready, for no one cared how you felt. From now on, every irregularity in your body is no longer yours. It becomes a message from destiny, from lineage, from the family whose name you now carry. You step down from the bed. Each movement echoes the night before. Not a call of love, but the sound of duty framed in a wedding ring and a civil registry. You pass the mirror. Stop. The person staring back looks like you, but is no longer you. Not the girl who loved to paint. Not the one who once dreamed of Paris, but a figure reprogrammed to bear, to nurture, to endure. You leave the room. The servants bow. Their eyes are gentle yet laden with meaning. Everyone is silently assessing your fertility by the way you walk. You eat breakfast with your husband's family. Bread, eggs, tea, and silence. No one asks how you feel. Only your mother-in-law speaks, soft as silk, sharp as a needle. Last night must have gone smoothly. You nod, because you are not allowed not to. From that day, you enter a new phase, waiting. Each day you count. Your menstrual cycle is no longer a natural occurrence. It is now the enemy of hope. You wish to be late, not because you long to be a mother, but because you fear being labeled a failure. You fear those gentle condolences, the whispers behind your back. Perhaps there is something wrong with her womb. By the third week after the wedding, the nausea begins. Everyone rejoices, you do not. You are not sure if it is pregnancy or your psyche revolting at a cellular level. And then the day comes. You are examined. No modern doctor, no ultrasound. Just a village midwife summoned to place her hand on your belly, muttering as though calling the spirit of the embryo into existence. Seems like, yes, she says. The household celebrates as if they had won a lottery. You smile and feel yourself beginning to disappear. From that moment on, you are no longer the newlywed. You are the incubator. Your body becomes national property. You must not run, must not climb stairs, must not eat spicy food, must not feel sadness. You are reminded to read scripture daily, to touch your belly each night, and to pray that the child is a boy. You understand now. This was the true purpose of marriage. Not love, not happiness, but reproduction. Reproduce at the right time. Reproduce the right gender. Reproduce in silence. 9 months pass in glorious stillness and quiet fear. You give birth. No anesthesia, no physician, no voice of your own. You scream not from pain, but because you feel yourself shattering. Not just your body, but your identity. You give birth to a daughter. The room falls quiet. Your husband smiles faintly, but not truly. Your mother-in-law says it is all right. The firstborn, being a girl, is lucky. The next will be a boy. You know it is not comfort. It is a warning. 1 year later, you are pregnant again. This time you do not dream. You do not feel the baby kick. You do not hum lullabies. You simply count the days as you count the few chances left to remain. And then a boy is born. A grand celebration is held. You are praised as a good wife, a complete woman, the mother of an heir. You sit quietly in a wooden chair, your chest aching with milk, your back with labor, your heart with the ache of never being asked if you are still yourself. And you understand everything is done. Your role is fulfilled. No one needs your love. No one needs your dreams. No one needs you to be a person. Your story, begun with a wedding gown, ends with a birth certificate bearing his surname. You were once a bride, now a mother. Tomorrow you will become a shadow along the margins of the family tree. And so you go on living, not to live, but to maintain a legacy one you were never allowed to name. You live to see 40. They call you past childbearing age, an old mother, the wife in retreat. The womb has served its term. Breasts sag, spine curves, vision dims. Your role in preserving the bloodline complete. No one says thank you. No one asks, what would you like to do now? You are retired, not officially. Just quieter breakfasts, more distant dinners, and a marriage bed that grows colder with each night. Your name is no longer spoken. One fine morning, for everyone else, your husband returns home wearing an unfamiliar smile. Behind him is a 17-year-old girl, long hair, rosy cheeks, and no understanding of what is about to unfold. She is introduced as a distant cousin needing shelter. A month later, a family art student. 3 months later, his second wife. You do not cry. You do not scream. You simply watch yourself retreat from the family portrait, literally. From the center, you are moved to the edge, then cut out of the frame entirely. A social edit performed with scissors and a family historian. The new wife gives birth. It is a boy. The family throws a grand party. The child is named after a third-generation ancestor signifying favor. And you sit in the back room, mending shirts, boiling porridge, pouring tea, and wondering why are we only needed until we finish doing what they wanted. Sometimes your children visit. They call you mother. Smile softly, but their eyes drift toward father's new wife, because that is where power resides. From you, only faint memories and the scent of dried herbs in a cold room. You begin to weaken, bent back, aching knees, a tight chest, constant coughing. No one takes you to a doctor, because in the Victorian household dictionary, a postmenopausal woman, zero reproductive return on investment. You lie in a wooden bed, with old blankets, cold tea. Occasionally a maid stops by to change the towel and reminds you, please keep quiet. There are guests downstairs, you understand. Time has passed you by. It did not pause. It did not ask for directions. It simply swept you away like it sweeps every woman beyond motherhood. One morning you do not wake. No one notices at first. The maid assumes you are asleep. By evening they realize you are gone, no tears, no farewell, no lullaby. Your husband arranges a modest funeral. Nothing grand. He is busy with the teething youngest. You are buried in the garden corner, beneath the cherry tree you once planted with your own hands. Your gravestone reads his surname. A good wife, a devoted mother passed in the year. No final words, no poetry, no personal sorrow. You fade, not in anyone's dreams, but in the system, a system that only remembers women while they are useful. And yet, someone still remembers you. The maid who once helped you unlace your wedding gown while you wept from holding in your urine. She slips a piece of lace into your coffin, the veil you once wore. No one sees. No one knows. but it is a final message from someone who bore witness to your quiet existence. And so you, the Victorian bride, lived, loved in silence, bore, suffered, and passed. Not into history books, only into the spaces between lines where women are edited out as the clutter of legacy. Would you like me to go on? To tell you of the women after you, who also wore 12-kilogram gowns, clenched their bladders, bore children in silence, and were buried behind the kitchen? Or would you rather hear the reverse if a bride from 1875 woke up in 2025 where she wears a wedding dress, weighing 2 kilograms, signs divorce papers if she wishes, and can choose not to bear children and still be called a person? Just say the word. I am ready to open the door through time. Because sometimes the best ending to a tragedy is the beginning of another dream.